look at all the work that we've done. But unfortunately, look at all the work we still have to do. Hey, what's up? It's Jason Hamburg. I'm excited to do this one. I've wanted to do this for a long time now. Today I want to talk about trail cutting, the process that I go through for planning out a trail, how I kind of approach it, things to think about, tools to use, all of that sort of stuff. So I'm going to get my saw all tuned up, get my bag all loaded up, and then we'll go from there. When it comes to trail cutting, you can get started pretty easily. Like, I think the first trail that I ever cut, I literally just had a handsaw and a bit of an idea of how I wanted to go through the trees. But this is a bit of an assortment of like the things that I keep with me at all times. Chainsaw, a helmet and bucking chaps, a handsaw, bug spray and bear spray, a couple pairs of gloves and a bug net, flagging tape, water and snacks, a Pulaski, a backpack to haul it all around in. So one of the first things that you need to think about when you're going to cut a trail is what I kind of call like a trail thesis, or a bit of a game plan essentially of how you want this trail to look, feel, ride, all that sort of stuff. Whenever I'm cutting, every decision that I make needs to contribute towards that end game, and that's essentially what I mean when I'm talking about a thesis. It can be, I want this to be really flowy and fun, or I want it to feel like a roller coaster, or whatever it is that you want your inspiration to be, but have that kind of guiding light in the early stages of planning, because without that, you're going to just kind of be hacking away through the forest or through the desert or wherever you're located. So the trail thesis is the good thing to have. One of the most important things to consider after your thesis, of course, is you have to think about the terrain that you're working with and the soil, and then understand that the soil is really going to dictate some of the decisions you have to make around like longevity and actual how much this trail is going to be able to be used over time. Be conscious of that, because if you are trying to cut something that's really, really soft dirt, just be aware that if it trenches out, is that going to make the trail unrideable, or is it going to make the trail, not what you want it to be? Yeah, try to think of the soil that you're working with and realize how you're going to cut it in order to complement that soil, not work against it. Also, for the people who are going to shit talk and be like, oh, look at Safety Steve with his helmet and his chaps. My friend owns a chainsaw store and has told me so many horror stories of people fucking hacking their legs up. For what it's worth, I'm just going to wear the stupid chaps and wear the helmet, because it makes life so much better when I don't have to have my ears rattle off and I can just like not squint my eyeballs the whole time. So suck it, people who are too cool for safety gear. I hope you get hit in the eyeball with a stick. So in the planning phase, one of the things that I always recommend for people to do is go out and actually walk other trails, walk existing trails, and get a gauge on distances and size of turns and all of those different things, because things look completely different when you're walking as they do when you have goggles on and you're on a bike and you're riding. I remember the first trail that I ever cut was so bad, because my version of a nice straight stretch, once I got onto a bike, it was like 20 feet and I was there like 1 millisecond. So things are typically, need to be further apart than you actually anticipate. But it's a really good practice, and it's a good way to learn, is just go and walk existing trails and be conscious of how far away things are, how big corners are, all that sort of thing. And when you go to cut your own trail, you'll do a lot better. You need to determine obviously where you're going to cut, but think about, does it make more sense to build a completely new trail, or are there sections of an existing trail network that could benefit from new pieces of trail? Sometimes that's an easier kind of task to take on. If you think about having to build an entirely new trail from scratch, sometimes that can be a little daunting, but maybe you just get your feet wet by connecting some existing trails to each other, or even just start by tidying up existing trail. If you're going to go out and walk trails to get a sense of how they look and how they feel by foot, bring a handsaw, bring a chainsaw, and tidy them up. Get rid of face slappers and just like do a little bit of maintenance to see what that process is like. And then finally, I think the last big piece to consider in the planning phase is this piece of trail that you're cutting going to be a full loop that's one directional, or are you cutting something that's kind of an out and back? The reason it's important to kind of think of that from the start is that when you start cutting and you're putting in, a big hill climb or a big downhill or something, you might just be cutting in one direction, but always turn around and look back, walk the trail backwards a little bit, and just make sure that every section that you're putting in actually is going to work both ways. Identifying early on, am I building a loop or am I building an out and back? And if I'm building either one of those, is this trail going to be ridden both ways? And then plan accordingly and build and cut accordingly so that it works in both directions if needed. Realizing, Genki, that I have done no good transitions into the sponsor read. Today's video is sponsored by PG Motorsports. They're a local shop here in Prince George. They're a KTM, Gas, Yamaha, Arctic Cat. I don't know, they sell like everything. They're a huge shop. But I've been working with them since 2015, 2016-ish. And man, they're awesome. Just like support the sport. Support group rides that we do, support everything that I'm trying to do with kind of my YouTube and Instagram and everything. And they're just an awesome shop that like cares about making people better. So if you're looking for, a bike, an ATV, side-by-side, snowmobile, any of that stuff, let me know and I'll put you in touch with them. And thanks again to them for supporting this video and a bunch of the videos on my channel. All of my trails, I use as much of the terrain as I can. I don't just like go for 30 kilometers and make like these massive loops. But as it stands right now, I've kind of roughed it in once and I'm coming back through and kind of tidying it up. But another thing that I would recommend for people is cut like 200 meters of trail and then ride it and then come back and make sure it's going to work before you cut more. Especially when you're first starting out. Again, the first trail I ever cut, it wasn't that long, maybe like 2 kilometers or something, if that. But I cut it and it was so fucking bad that I've literally never ridden it ever again because I just didn't know what I was doing. So go out, cut a couple 100 meters, ride it, come back and say, okay, this worked well, this didn't work well, I'm going to adjust from here. And I honestly still kind of do that to this day. Like I just put in little chunks at a time and ride them, feel them out. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rough this in, try to get I'll try to get rid of kind of any like big major things out of the way. But I'll leave it pretty rough, and you can afford to do that when you're cutting dirt bike trail. You can leave it rough, ride it in, and then kind of tidy as you go. So that's the process that I'm at right now, is just get it so that it's passable by a bike, and then I'll come down, I'll ride it and see how it feels and adjust from there, kind of thing. Oh, Devil's Club, hell, man. So this tree right here is a really good like example of when I talk about a trail thesis. This thing sucks. It's like slightly elevated over here. It's angled. When it's wet, it's going to be a nightmare. And then there's actually a second one right after it. If the thesis for me though is like make it hard, make it awkward, make it just not really enjoyable unless you have the skills to do it, I'm going to leave things like this in and at least try them, like give them an honest shakedown to try to figure out how I can clear them every time and get past them. You can always come back and remove obstacles, but if you just blast your way through and don't leave anything to kind of challenge you, you're gonna end up with a trail that's like pretty boring and you're gonna outgrow very fast. One of the things that's important to remember when you're cutting, especially in the trees like this, is think about when you're standing on a bike, you're like 2 feet taller than if you're just standing regularly. So always look up and like look at things like this, which if I'm walking, doesn't really impact me. But if I'm riding, that's like directly in my face. So easy way to keep face slappers out of your trail is just like envision yourself being 2 feet taller standing up on the pegs. I mentioned they should bring water and snacks, but for some people it could probably be just as hard, if not harder, to trail cut than it is to ride. So you want to make sure you're drinking lots of water and eating every now and then, so you don't just start bonking out here. I also recommend not waiting until early August to go and cut, so that you're not just fighting Jurassic Park level Devil's Club. But can't win them all, man. Another thing that can go a long way as far as like learning how to cut is figure out who in your community cuts or maintains trail or whatever that looks like, and volunteer to go out and help support them. Maybe they're cutting something new or doing some trail maintenance. You know, find a group on Facebook in your area or go and talk to the local shop. They'll probably know, hey, these are the people that are cutting trail, and they should be able to put you guys in contact. So that's kind of a fast way to learn the ropes, essentially. Just cut with somebody, because that's the other thing too, is I could go into real detail about how I cut where I live, but for so many people it's completely different, right? I rode a bunch of trails in February in Arizona, and I wouldn't even know the first place to begin as far as how to cut that trail. So there's some theories behind envisioning what you want and coming up with a plan on how to do it. But when it comes to the actual application of how you cut in your area, the best thing to do is find somebody who's already done it and try to learn from them. I always try to think of like, if I do crash, where am I going to crash, and make sure that there's no just like very obvious things that I could have done to clear it out so that I didn't get more hurt. You know, just like random branches that stick up that are like this long and super hard and would just like penetrate your ribs or something stupid. I cut my hard sections with crashing in mind so that if I do fall, I don't become a shish kebab. Another thing that I like to think about, or it's important to think about when you're cutting, put yourself into a worst case scenario. What happens if somebody gets hurt and breaks an arm, breaks a leg, or worse? How do you get out of your trail at any given point? It's important to put easy outs or ride arounds or connect up to 2-track just for safety's sake, because if something does go wrong and you don't have an easy out, yeah, it's not a good thing. You got to be conscious of that and try to think about building those things into your trail just for safety's sake. Well, I probably missed something. I probably missed a lot of things, to be honest, but I hope that's enough to kind of get you interested in going to trail cut, because people cutting trails or maintaining trails or helping people cut trails, whatever it is a good thing. Yeah, if you have questions, you kind of want to know more, or there's something that I didn't talk about in the video that you're curious about when it comes to trail cutting, let me know, comment, send me a message on Instagram, and yeah, until next time, thank you.